And assuming everyone can hear me well, I will begin with the 1AC. In the late 1970s, the federal government believed that it would be of the utmost benefit to the economy and environment if private producers developed new synthetic fuels. But the government could not directly force these companies to produce these fuels. So instead, the government incentivized them by co-signing loans for these companies. This meant that in the occasion of corporate bankruptcy or loan default, the government would cover the difference. That is precisely what happened, and the government was forced to pay billions of dollars to cover these ill-contrived loans. Currently, there's a federal program to give these same type of loan guarantees to energy production and distribution companies. But as was the case with synthetic fuels, the policy is setting the government up for a major windfall in which taxpayers will have to foot the bill for billions of dollars in fiscally irresponsible loan guarantees. Therefore, we are resolved that the United States federal government should substantially reform its energy policy. Before we get into this, let's define what a loan guarantee is. Taxpayers for Common Sense in September of 2012 wrote that, quote, federal loan guarantees allow borrowers to receive a privately financed loan with the federal government assuming the risk. Put simply, a loan guarantee provides its recipient with the backing of the U.S. Treasury if their privately financed loan defaults. In the case of the DOE Loan Guarantee Program, the federal government can take responsibility for up to 80% of a qualified energy project's cost. This brings us to our thesis and goal for the round in light of loan guarantees, that is, the goal of economic responsibility. Economic responsibility. My partner and I believe that our government must be responsible with taxpayers' dollars. That is why we believe that economic responsibility should be used to judge this round. Now let's go to the first fact of the current system. Fact 1, billions in guarantee authority. Billions in guarantee authority. The DOE Loan Programs Office Annual Portfolio Status Report for fiscal year 2019 wrote, quote, up to $24 billion for the Title 17 Innovative Energy Loan Guarantee Program. That is, it is available. This program has guaranteed loans and lost billions of taxpayer dollars before. This is a very unwise policy, which is demonstrated in no better way than through Fact 2, history. Fact 2, history. Taxpayers for Common Sense, a policy education center, wrote on December 8th of 2010 that, quote, a loan guarantee program of this size and structure already puts the federal government at significant economic risk. The DOE in its one previous test case ended with taxpayers paying a heavy price. The federal government was forced to pay billions to cover the losses. The current loan guarantees, much like the synthetic fuels loan guarantees, are slated to provide guarantees to financially risky industries, many of which have received billions of dollars in past subsidies. Loan guarantee manipulation has been tried before. The program failed dismally then, and this quote-unquote new program is following the same path. As we can see through Harm 1, billions wasted. Harm 1, billions wasted. Congressman Randy Weber, leading a congressional hearing about the program on February 15, 2017, wrote that, quote, it is clear that the DOE Loan Guarantee Program is expensive. The Government Accountability Office estimates that the cost for the current loan guarantees is $2.2 billion, with a B. Supporters argue the cost is justified if we can help innovative technologies make the leap to the commercial market, but what if federal meddling in the market actually hurts innovation? Unquote. This statement brings us directly to our second harm, that is Harm 2, guaranteed loans, guarantee failure. You can abbreviate this as GL's guarantee failure. Guaranteed loans, guarantee failure. And there are two subpoints under this. First, that it distorts the market. Distorts market. Congressman Weber, chairman of the Congressional Subcommittee on Energy, wrote in 2017 that, quote, taxpayers often end up paying higher prices for their power because of federal government meddling in the energy market. For example, when the DOE provided a $1.6 billion loan guarantee to the Ivanpah Solar Project in California, the ratepayers in Southern California will now pay 2 to 5 times more for power generated by this facility, in addition to being stuck with the bill if the project goes into default. The truth is that when the DOE provides loan guarantees, there is no benefit for the taxpayer, even if the guaranteed loan is paid in full. Regular Americans take on the liability of the full loan. They don't see a return, and they can end up paying more for the electricity if and when the project is actually built, unquote. Even in a case where companies did not fail, even in a case where the company does not go bankrupt, loan guarantees distort markets. This brings us to subpoint B, removes incentive to innovate. Removes incentive to innovate. PhD Veronica DeRuggi, a researcher focusing on the U.S. economy and the federal budget, pointed out in congressional testimony that, quote, the problems with loan guarantees, like Section 1703 and 1705, are much more fundamental than the cost of one or more failed projects. In fact, the economic literature shows that every loan guarantee program transfers the risks from lenders to taxpayers, is likely to inhibit innovation, and increases the overall cost of borrowing, unquote. Loan guarantees not only remove the risk in failure, they also remove the need for success. Why must private people be made to pay through taxes for the failed private companies, which only need guarantees because private investors already deemed them too risky for investment in the first place? Considering the past, the present, and even the ideals, there is simply no economic reason for federal loan guarantees. Therefore, we propose the following plan. Mandate. Cancel all remaining DOE loan guarantee authority under Title 17 of the Energy Policy Act of 2005. The Department of Energy will no longer give out loan guarantees. Our agency and enforcement include Congress, the U.S. Treasury, the Department of Energy, and applicable governmental agencies. In regard to funding, the plan is purely legislative, but any incidental fees will be paid out of the DOE general budget. And remaining loan guarantee authority will be redirected to the DOE's loan programs. Our timeline is immediately upon an affirmative ballot. No more DOE loan guarantees will be given out. This leads to two advantages, and the first one is very simple. Advantage 1, save money. Save money. By abolishing this fiscally irresponsible program that gambles our tax dollars, whether we like it or not, on risky private companies, taxpayers' dollars will no longer go to waste. This directly upholds our thesis of fiscal responsibility. And this brings us to advantage 2, innovation protected. Innovation protected. Without loan guarantees by the government, alternative energy companies will need to actually make a competitive product and convince private investors to invest their money. This will result in better technology and ultimately better prices for consumers. In conclusion, alternative energy companies already have access to billions of dollars from the private market. There's no need for the government to be involved, using our tax dollars to pay the failed, risky private companies which we in the free market decided not to invest in from the beginning. An affirmative ballot will ensure that taxpayer dollars are no longer wasted. It's an honor speaking for you all today. I now stand ready for any questions the negative team may have.
All right. Assuming the affirmative team is ready?
Yes, of course.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and get started. First, congratulations on making it to finals. Obviously, I have a couple of questions. So first, can we get a copy of your 1AC sent to us?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So you talked about the synthetic fuels loan guarantee program that we had earlier on. And are those the same loan guarantees as the one we're giving out now?
Yes, a loan guarantee is where the government co-signs a loan for a company, and the government is essentially saying if that company goes bankrupt, the government will pay off their loan.
Okay. Is it the same program?
It is the same type of loan guarantee.
Okay,
loan guarantee is only one.
Is it the exact same program?
No, it is for synthetic fuels.
Okay. Can we get the program for synthetic fuels and then the program for loan guarantees in Section 17?
We can bring you a piece of evidence regarding the history of the synthetic fuels loan guarantee program, and we can pass over Section 17.
Okay, awesome. Now, you would agree that it's important for the United States to be one of the leading technology innovators in the world, correct?
It is important because perhaps we are.
Okay, awesome. And so are you ending all loan guarantees or just for alternative energy companies or just all of them?
Ending all Department of Energy loan guarantees.
And if I heard your mandate right, you're transferring those to normal loans?
Yes, transferring the remaining loan guarantee authority, that is $28 billion, to actual loans, which actually see a return in interest, though a loan guarantee is completely a gamble without any chance of return, but only failure.
Okay, so what happens to the current loan guarantees that we've given out?
The current loan guarantees are contractual obligations, so those are not and will not be changed.
Okay. So what happens to a private company that possibly has an incredible idea that could revolutionize our energy industry? The only problem is they don't have the funds to build that and bring it to the market. How does
Absolutely.
the free market help that company?
The free market will help that company when the company brings their proposition to private investors, but the federal government will also help that company when they offer them a loan. That company can go to the Department of Energy and ask for a loan, which is a very sensible option. But a loan guarantee will only pay the company if it fails, which has nothing to do with the development of that company.
Okay, awesome. Now, you said that the loan guarantee program cost us $2.2 billion. Now, that quote specifically said cost. Now, is that $2.2 billion lost, or is that just the implementation of the program?
That is in losses for defaults. 5 companies
Okay.
have defaulted.
Okay, awesome. Now, you talked about how loan guarantees result in higher prices for electricity. Is that higher prices because of the loan guarantees or higher prices because of the renewable energy?
No, that is higher prices because of the loan guarantees. The loan guarantees remove the incentive for a company to actually function well. They remove the incentive to innovate because they know that if they fail, they have no burden, no financial burden.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you very much.
HUMI.
All right, no prep time is needed, and as soon as this clock is set, we will go ahead and get started. All right, with 8 minutes on the clock, we'll go ahead and begin. Hegemony and leadership. The first word, hegemony, is a bit difficult to describe, so I'll just jump right in, and I'd like to describe for you hegemony. The American government and the American people strive to be a hegemonous nation, and hegemony means that we have leadership. We have control over a sector. Perhaps we have military hegemony or control over the Western Hemisphere. It's something that our leaders and our people inherently have always striven for, because hegemony protects freedom, hegemony protects innovation, and hegemony in general and leadership within a sector, within our world and the globe, leads to a better place for Americans. And it is because of those reasons that I'd like to get started with my first point. The affirmative team's plan will be undermining hegemony and leadership. And this might not sound significant at first, but as we get into it, we will find that it is absolutely critically detrimental to the everyday lives of Americans like you and I. We'll begin with a quote from the U.S. Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. They cited a letter by a bipartisan group of senators in April 8th of 2019, which read, quote, Title IX of this loan guarantee program has a loss ratio well below that of conventional lenders and has demonstrated a history of successful investment in renewable energy and energy efficiency technologies. Ultimately, the program helps to ensure that the United States continues to be a leader in promoting the successful development of innovative energy technologies that help provide meaningful solutions to our nation's energy challenges, end quote. What this bipartisan group of senators was trying to convey and get across is that the loan protection program, this loan guarantee, actually not only doesn't stifle innovation, but it puts the American public, the American industry, and you and I first and foremost on the global stage of renewable energy production, and first and foremost on the cutting edge of innovation within one of the world's most critical industries. When we think as people, everyday Americans right now in the moment, when we think of the things that matter most to us, perhaps things that we need to get by in living, well, right now it's quite hot here in Tennessee, and I find the need for air conditioning quite compulsory. Just like that, numerous Americans across our entire world and within our nation find the need for energy to be absolutely critical. Our military needs energy, everyday Americans need it, and being a leader in the energy sector is something that Americans have always striven for. The LPO, or the Loan Protection Program, has enabled breakthrough energy advances that have substantially boosted our energy industry and leave us as a leader. The Energy Future Initiatives submitted a report to Congress. They are a nonpartisan think tank led by former Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz. They supported this report in March of 2018, which found that the LPO portfolio has included many key first-of-a-kind commercial-scale developments of innovative energy technologies, including the first new nuclear power plant to begin construction in the United States in more than 30 years, one of the world's largest wind energy projects, the initial deployment of solar photovoltaics, and solar thermal power generation projects at a utility scale, and more than a dozen new or retooled auto manufacturing plants across the nation. These programs have helped sustain the United States as a leader in innovative clean energy technologies and advanced auto manufacturing in the face of increasingly stiff international competition, especially from China, end quote. This is where we realize the issue. America's hegemony is being compromised. There is stiff international competition from one of our greatest rivals, which means that America's leaderboard position in the energy industry is being compromised. Energy and policy expert, the director of the Center for Energy Policy and Finance at Stanford University, and a former Assistant Secretary of Energy, Dan Riker, testified before the Senate on February 15th of 2017, saying the U.S. government has long played a vital and successful role in helping to commercialize energy technology, and it is a role that should continue under the LPO, especially in light of unprecedented competition from other countries, in particular China. So we see not only that our hegemony and our leadership in the energy industry is being compromised, but it would be further compromised by the affirmative team's plan. Now, let's take a quick look back at a return on investment. Whenever we're engaging in any sort of business operation, trying to enable something that we believe could be useful for our economy, for any business or enterprise, we need to look at an ROI, or return on investment. It begins with a cost-benefit analysis. Is this costing us more than it is benefiting us, or what is happening? So firstly, before we even get into that, it's critical to realize that Title IX has a rigorous application process to ensure that the federal government is making wise investments. The U.S. Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources published a report in April 8th of 2019 that found that in order to qualify for a Title IX loan guarantee, developers must undergo a rigorous two-part application that requires applicants to demonstrate that the project meets rigorous standards for innovation. Furthermore, applicants must prove satisfactory financing requirements to see the project to completion, as well as pay application fees that begin at $50,000 in the first phase of application and increase dramatically in the second phase of the application. Currently, there are numerous viable projects in the application pipeline from companies who have already significantly invested considerable time and money into the application process. What this long quote tells us is firstly that the federal government is not just giving away loans without scruple. They are doing so to ensure a return on investment. Secondly, these companies are still forced to innovate. They must provide to the federal government and to their investigators that this project is innovative, that it will lead us back to leadership on the energy industry's timetable. They also must pay significant portions of money to even begin to enter this pipeline. And lastly, there are numerous companies under this current program that are currently in the pipeline moving towards this that the affirmative team would absolutely be ignoring and shutting out, encouraging economic losses. The U.S. is generating quantities of money that are uncalculable through this program. In fact, we can quantify it from that study from the Energy Future Initiatives, the nonpartisan think tank in March of 2018. They found that the LPO's portfolio has resulted in almost $2 billion in interest payments for the American taxpayer. And the program is expected to bring in roughly $5 billion more over the course of the investments, those same investments that we've already conducted. They found that interest payments received to date exceed portfolio losses of, get this, $810 million. What that's saying is that due to this conclusive empirical review, this program that the affirmative team has said is costing us billions has only cost $810 million to the taxpayer. And even if it had cost us more, even if it had cost us that sufficient amount of billions, those billions are not lost. Innovation and leadership are upheld while countless jobs and industry are supported. And this is where we'll get to my last point, economic acceleration. That same study from the Energy Future Initiatives found that the total economic and societal benefits of the program are significantly larger than reported because it creates and sustains high-quality jobs. To date, the $50 billion in total project investment has created or saved 56,000 American jobs, boosted local economies, and accelerated markets. And it says that it's also reduced our emissions. Now, the affirmative team will likely say that this is past investments, but actually, just like they look to history, let's look to history. This is what the program has provided us for. This plan by the affirmative team would doom future jobs, doom future hegemony, and doom future economic acceleration. Not only is this project making the American public, you and I, money by direct investments back into the LPO, a $2 billion worth of money for us, but it's also supporting our economy, industry, and leadership in enormous levels. Thank you. and now stand ready for any questions the affirmative team may have.
All right, thank you for that speech. I see that I have an echo on some microphone. Okay, I'll just go ahead anyways. So my first question is in regard to the basic idea of your speech, and I would like to ask, why do you believe that a loan guarantee, which pays a company only when it fails, is a help to the market, is a help to successful companies?
Actually, a loan guarantee doesn't just pay a company when it fails. A loan guarantee provides for that company to have sufficient cash flow and government support for their project as they're engaging in the increasingly risky business of innovation in our energy sector. And as it does so, it allows the federal government not only have a first-person perspective into what our energy industry is doing, but to have that input, that first-person input into eliminating our hegemony failure.
Okay, thank you. Aside from loans, could you explain to us exactly what a loan guarantee does?
Absolutely. So, I mean, this is your plan of getting rid of loan guarantees. But what a loan guarantee does is it provides for stability in a risky environment. So
how does it provide for stability?
Absolutely. So when these alternative energy companies are engaging in this risky environment, it allows the government to subsume that risk. Its federal reserves are well coffered, and it has the ability to create additional money and buffeting for this risk. And we can provide evidence of that if you'd like. And as it does so, it takes that risk away from those companies and allows them to innovate and allows them to provide the government with numerous amounts of money. And in fact, those companies have paid the government back in due part, creating profits for the American people. So as the loan guarantee program carries itself through, it's actually a source of profit for the American people and not demise.
All right. Why do you believe that it is a source of profit? And secondly, why do you believe that some companies deserve to have their debt paid off if they fail?
Certainly. So I don't believe that we are just saying, oh, if you fail, here, we'll pay this off for you. What we're doing is we're providing a loan guarantee program, which guarantees this loan, which guarantees that risk will be subsumed for these companies so they can strive to allow the United States to become a leader in energy, which supports our domestic production, it supports our international production, and it also supports our Department of Defense. And as it does so, the government must choose to support these industries. And it's not just supporting only alternative energy industries. It's supporting our entire sector. And as it does so through numerous programs, this is the only one of which you are touching within today's round. And that's also incredibly critical because of the increasing modernization of our global supply.
Okay. Thank you very much for your answers.
Hold on, let me just pull up my clock here really quickly. There we go. Beginning 5 minutes of preparation time. Ending preparation time at 2 minutes and 3 seconds. Used. 2 minutes and 3 seconds used. All right. I'm going to assume that everybody is ready. And if you can't hear me, just go ahead and give me a little shout out. All right, I'll begin. Allow me to tell you a fictitious story of little Anthony Garibaldi, but we can call him Tony. When Tony was 14 months old, he started to learn how to walk. And he took his very first step, wobbled a little bit, and then fell down hard. Now, his parents saw that in him learning to walk, there was a risk of him falling. And they determined that because of that risk, little Antonio deserved no risk. So they went out and they bought him a small wheelchair. Year after year, they continued to get him a wheelchair as he grew, each one a little bit larger than the last. Their reasoning was, when he's finally older and strong enough to walk, he'll be able to walk on his own. Then, on his 12th birthday, they didn't get him another wheelchair. They got him a bicycle. They said, it's time for you to learn how to walk. So he decided, okay, I can do it now. I'm strong, I'm big, I'm grown. He tried to take a step, took one step, wobbled, and fell hard. And it is because of the situation of fictitious little Tony Garibaldi that I stand resolved. The United States federal government should abolish its fiscally and economically irresponsible loan guarantee program. In this, the second affirmative speech of the round, what I will be doing is I will be working my way down the flow and responding to the last speech. And then at the end of this speech, take a look at the problems in the current system once again. So let's jump right in at the very top, that point of undermining leadership. Undermining leadership. And our response to this is simply only ending one type of aid. Only ending one type of aid. Now, the negative would like you to believe that we are ending all government aid to the renewable energy sector. The fact is, this is not the case at all. There are two different types of government aid that we will not be ending specifically. The first is that of research and development funding. Research and development funding. This is from a report by the Congressional Research Service updated on March 18th, 2020. They inform us that the Department of Energy total research and development funding to be allocated in the fiscal year 2020 is over $16 billion. The fact is, if a product is truly this risky, if it's so risky that it cannot receive any private investment, that means that it is probably not ready for the global market. And that means it still needs to be in the research and development phase. And we find that the federal government is providing plenty of funding towards the research and development of new green energy technology. But the second area in which we are not ending government aid is that of green energy loans. In fact, our very own plan is taking $24 billion from the loan guarantee program and diverting it to the government loan program. And this actually brings us directly into the next point, a point of clarification, that of loan versus loan guarantee. And this is crucial in today's debate round that we understand the difference between these. A loan from the government is when the government will lend money to a private innovator or a company who desires to start a new technology. And then the federal government has ways to recoup their losses. For example, if the company goes into default, the government will take collateral. The government receives interest payments to help offset the losses of defaulted projects. In a loan program, we find very good management, and we find that the federal government has made quite a lot of money, as we'll get to a little bit later on in this speech. But through a loan guarantee program, best case scenario for the government, none of the companies default, and the government gains zero. Worst case scenario, billions of taxpayer dollars are lost. The federal government, through a loan guarantee program, is gambling taxpayer monies into industries, into projects that the taxpayers themselves considered too risky to invest in the first place. This is a fiscally irresponsible program. So with that in mind, let us turn our attention to the next main point, that of return on investment. And in his last speech, the negative discussed the fact that there is a rigorous application process. We have two responses to this. The first response is Title IX. Title IX. According to the negative himself, he was discussing the Title IX loan guarantees. However, that is of an entirely different policy that we're not even discussing in today's debate round. That was of the policy of the Farm Bill, or the Farm Bill, Title IX of the Farm Bill, which provides subsidies from the United States Department of Agriculture. What we are discussing is the Department of Energy loan guarantees under Title 17 of the Energy Policy Act of 2005. Thus, his evidence by his own admission does not apply to today's debate round. But the second response is the numbers. The numbers. When we actually look at the numbers of amount lost in today's debate round, we find that it is $2.2 billion. And yes, the negative can claim that there's a rigorous application process, that it's supposed to make sure we don't lose that much money. But when we look at the numbers of what has been lost to date in a relatively new program, we find that $2.2 billion has been lost. Or maybe it is the negative's more frugal amount of $810 million. That is still a substantial amount of money. The fact is, we have lost a lot of money through this program, whether there's a rigorous application process or not. $2.2 billion has been lost. Now, looking at the economic benefits or the return on investment that the negative is claiming, when we actually look at the evidence they supply, we find two things. First, they are discussing loans. They are discussing loans. For example, the number $2 billion in interest payments, that was a statistic that was brought up in the last speech to show that the Loan Program Office is doing really well. That was $2 billion in interest payments off of loans. But here's the thing, we are not ending loans. We are ending loan guarantees. The federal government has been able to loan and make $2 billion off of the interest payments. But when they give a loan guarantee, the federal government receives nothing off of an interest payment. So ultimately, what we can see is many of these economic benefits that the negative has provided come from the loan program, not from the loan guarantee program. Now, let's move on from that to looking at the numbers of 56,000 jobs and $50 billion in investment that has been poured into the economy and been poured into green energy technologies. Let's take that number, 56,000 jobs. There are two responses to this. The first is loan guarantees do nothing. Loan guarantees do nothing. And this is by way of creating jobs. Loan guarantees cannot create jobs because the very nature of a loan guarantee is they only pay in the instance of failure. The only revenue that comes from a loan guarantee to a company is if the company files for bankruptcy and is unable to pay back their privately financed loan. Thus, the loan guarantee did nothing. But secondly, even if the loan guarantee was responsible for procuring these jobs, let's look at the nature of these jobs. The fact is, the vast majority of these jobs, the vast majority of this employment is temporary. Let's take a look at the California Valley Solar Ranch. This company received a $1.2 billion loan guarantee. And this is from the Department of Energy Loan Program Office discussing this project. Quote, California Valley Solar Ranch produced 350 construction jobs and is expected to support 11 permanent jobs. End quote. 11 permanent jobs. When we go through the entire loan guarantee portfolio, we find the amount of permanent jobs that have been created to date are 593. Not 56,000 as the negative would like you to believe, but 593. Yes, those 56,000 were important, but they have already been ended. At the end of the day, we see that there is no net economic benefit to this program. Thank you, and I now stand ready for cross-examination.
All right. And with 3 minutes set on the clock, then we'll go ahead and get started. First off, congratulations on making it to finals. I'm going to jump right in. Firstly, are you aware of the show called Shark Tank?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Can you agree that within that show, somebody comes to pitch an idea, and then there's a group of investors, and those investors agree to assume risk on behalf of that person?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Can you agree that as they agree to assume that risk, they do so with the expectation that they can have a stake in that company?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Can you agree that those people then, if they come to an agreement and a deal, they become essentially business partners?
In this instance, yes.
Okay, perfect. Can you agree that they're able to show each other leadership, they can establish new markets for them, and they can help them along the process?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Can you agree if you were an investor, you would be looking for something that is going to benefit you on Shark Tank?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And can you agree that you brought up a figure, let's establish this here. You brought up a figure that we're losing billions under these loan partnerships. And then you said that the entire program cost $2.2 billion to date. So how does that reconcile? If we're losing billions and it's only cost $2.2 billion to date, how does that work?
Well, $2.2 billion is more than 1 billion. Therefore, it is billions because
Absolutely.
it's at least
But
2 billion.
you're saying we've lost all 2.2 billion that we've implemented.
Yes, we have lost. It's not. That is not the amount
No,
that we have vouched.
So we've lost 100% of our investment.
No, we have not vouched $2.2 billion. The total amount that has been vouched for, I believe, is $28 billion, and we can provide evidence for that. The total amount lost to date is $2.2 billion.
Okay, well, can you agree that your quote under expensive program, that was your tag, said that the entire program had cost $2.2 billion? Then before that, in the 1AC, you had said that billions had been lost. So how does that reconcile? That's what I'm asking. You've got two conflicting pieces of evidence here.
The evidence there discussing the $2.2 billion was the amount that has cost us, the amount that we have paid out already.
Okay, to establish the program. Perfect. Thank you. And how does that reconcile with the $810 million losses that we've presented?
Once again, there are, as in many instances, when we look at specific numbers and studies, there are different numbers that come about from different evidence. Okay. However,
thank you. I just a couple more seconds, so let me get through this. Okay. Do you happen to know what a portfolio is?
Yes, the portfolio is essentially the list of the programs that are in this loan guarantee program.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And can you agree that the federal government essentially co-signs, according to your own definition of loan guarantees, they co-sign alongside these innovative partnerships to become business partners, essentially?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then can you agree I accidentally misread my pieces of evidence were about Title 17?
If we you'd have to bring that up again in future speeches.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. No further questions.
The negative team will start prep time at 5 minutes. No further prep time is necessary. The negative team has 4 minutes and 9 seconds of prep time remaining. All right. Okay. Assuming everyone is ready, I will set the timer to 8 minutes. And we can go ahead and get started. In this round, we're talking a lot about investment. So as the negative side, we think we should strive for a return on an investment. And that's exactly what the negative side is shooting for. And because we believe that this loan program has actually benefited the United States in many substantial ways, that we believe it should be kept. Now, of course, with any loan program, the affirmative team can point to a couple of examples where it's failed. But on the net, the evidence goes to show that this loan program has benefited the United States. In the second negative constructive, I'll be first giving you a clarification point about what a loan guarantee is, and then jumping into several contentions showing you the returns on investment from the loan guarantee program. So we can go into my first point, and you can simply tag that a loan guarantee. A loan guarantee. And this is just to clarify what a loan guarantee is. The affirmative team simply keeps saying that a loan guarantee is a loan where the government only pays the company once they've failed. And that's absolutely not the case. And this is actually according to the affirmative team's own definition of a loan guarantee in their 1AC. To read their definition from Taxpayers for Common Sense in September of 2012, it says, quote, federal loan guarantees allow borrowers to receive a privately financed loan with federal governments assuming the risk. So these companies, they get a loan with the government assuming the risk. So they get that capital. But simply, a loan guarantee provides its recipient with the backing of the U.S. Treasury if their privately financed loans default, end quote. So they're backing this loan, they're giving them the loan, and if it defaults, the government picks up the cost of that. They do receive capital. They don't just receive capital when they fail. That wouldn't make any sense at all. That wouldn't be a loan. So the reality is that's what a loan guarantee is. They receive capital, and when they default, if they default, the government picks up the cost. Now, to show you why the loan guarantee program is successful, I want to jump to my next point. And you can write this down as minimized risk. Minimized risk. The loan guarantee is actually a very sensible loan guarantee program because it has minimized risk. So my first subpoint is rigorous application. Rigorous application. And if you remember back to my partner's speech, he actually read this same quote. And I want to point out my partner accidentally misstated what the quote said. He said it said Title IX. It actually says Title 17, specifically the loan guarantees that we're dealing with. Let me read it again. U.S. Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources, citing a letter by a bipartisan group of senators in April of 2019, says, quote, in order to qualify for Title 17 loan guarantees, specifically, these are not just loans as the negative team said that we were talking about, these are loan guarantees, must undergo a rigorous two-part application process requiring applicants to demonstrate that the project meets rigorous standards for innovation, end quote. So they have to go under a rigorous evaluation process to even qualify for that. My second subpoint is stringent evaluation. Stringent evaluation. Energy Future Initiatives published a study that said, quote, the LPO process benefits from a uniquely detailed evaluation of technical risks, drawing on the scientific and engineering expertise through the department and national laboratories. The GAO reported that private lenders found LPO's due diligence to be as stringent, if not more stringent, than often found in the private sector, end quote. So these loan guarantees are among the best in the business. And we're going to show how that manifests itself in my next couple points. My next point is that of the monetary ROI. Monetary ROI. The loan guarantee program provides us with a monetary ROI. And my partner talked about this, how it's lost only $810 billion and granted us over almost $2 billion in interest payments. Now, the affirmative team's response to this was that, well, this was talking about loans, not loan guarantees. And that is absolutely not the case. Let me read you another quote specifically talking about these losses. Energy and policy expert Dan Riker wrote in a testimony before the Senate on February 5th of 2017, quote, today, actual and estimated losses to the portfolios are approximately 810 million, or only a little over 2% of the program's loans, loan guarantees, and commitments, and roughly half of the approximately 1.79 billion in interest payments the program has earned to date. Importantly, this 810 million in loan losses is a small fraction of the 10 billion set aside for Congress to cover failed loans, end quote. Now, that was in his testimony titled Risky Business, the DOE Loan Guarantee Program. This is specifically dealing with loan guarantees. It does mention other loans, but this quote is specifically dealing with loan guarantees. And my partner's evidence was specifically dealing with that. Now, so we've lost 810 million. We can see that, but we've gained almost $2 billion in revenue. There is a very clear monetary ROI. But furthermore, there's an environmental ROI, and that's my next point, environmental ROI. My first subpoint is driving renewables. This program is driving renewables. Philip Rossetti wrote for the American Action Forum on December 3rd of 2018. He explained that this program is driving renewable energy production. It's helping to benefit the United States. It's increased substantially the amount of solar that we've actually been used. According to Energy Future Initiatives, they said, quote, the program administered by the LPO are quintessential public-private partnerships that provide credit supports to help de-risk projects and thus leverage private sector investment capital, end quote. The reality is it's driving innovation in environment and renewable fuels. And according to Senator Bobby Rush, a ranking member on the Energy Subcommittee, and Joe Barton, vice chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, they published in January of 2018, quote, in addition to the positive economic impact of the Loan Program Office in regions across the country, the return on investment for these projects has been stellar. To date, the Loan Program Office has created over $50 billion in total project investments, saved or created 56,000 American jobs, and has greatly assisted local economies. Additionally, projects within the LPO portfolios have helped to decrease carbon emissions while also saving money for consumers by preventing 34.7 million metric tons of CO2 emissions, end quote. So there's an environmental ROI. And that leads me to my next point, the future ROI. The future ROI. Now, even if we didn't have this monetary or environmental ROI, the Loan Program Office would be a worthy investment, and here's why. It is very clearly driving production and innovating in an industry where we need more innovation, in an industry where the United States strives to be the leader in the world. It's an investment in our future. And so even if we weren't getting current ROIs, which we very clearly are, the reality is this is an investment in our future, something that we need to be looking towards in the future. And that leads me to my final point. And you can write this down as free market cooperation, not distortion. free market cooperation, not distortion. Now, they say these loan programs distort the market, and I believe that's not the case. They come together with the market and work to drive innovation. Philip Rossetti wrote in December of 2018, quote, "The rationale behind the LPO is that the private sector has little economic incentive to pursue clean energy innovation on its own, creating a market failure as there is no market incentive to address the externalities of pollution. Several factors underscore this reality. Electricity production is extremely capital intensive. It costs a lot upfront to build a generation facility," end quote. And then the executive director of management consulting firm Bear Studio LLC, Lexi Jackson, published in August of 2019, quote, "LPO's projects have transformed America's energy infrastructure and accelerated growth in clean energy and electric vehicle markets. LPO projects have created or saved over 56,000 jobs all across the region and have generated over 50 billion in total project investment," end quote. So when private investors see that the government is investing or giving a loan guarantee to a specific industry, they say, hey, we can jump on that bandwagon too and make money as well. So it's cooperating, not distorting with the free market. So when we look at the program, the loan program, we see it minimizes the risks and provides massive returns on investments, and will continue to do that in the future. And it's because of this that we believe the loan program should be kept. I now stand ready for cross-examination.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Hello, first of all, congratulations on making it to finals. I just have a few questions for you today. First of all, let's examine your response of minimized risk. Now your contention is essentially because of that application process, there isn't much risk to the taxpayers or even in this investment as a whole. Is that correct?
It's essentially to explain part of the reason why this program is so expensive. It may not be the sole, maybe not expensive, beneficial. It may not be the sole reason, but it is one of them.
All right. Now, did you do anything to respond to the fact that the numbers show that there is failure in the current system under this program?
I showed specifically that there's success under this program, that our losses have been 810 million and the revenues have been almost 2 billion.
Okay, so moving on to that point specifically, you said the revenues have been 2 billion. What was that $2 billion revenue from exactly?
In interest payments.
Interest payments. Now, moving on to your idea of what exactly a loan guarantee is. Is it your contention that the companies repay their loan guarantee to the federal government?
According to your definition, federal loan guarantees allow borrowers to receive a privately financed loan. So it's a loan, yes.
But it is a privately financed loan.
By the government, sure, yeah.
So it's a third-party loan that the government is essentially co-signing.
I'd have to look back for sure at the definition, but a loan guarantee is where the government gives a loan to the company and it picks up the tab if they default.
All right, thank you. Now, moving on to your point about driving renewables, have you provided any evidence that the loan guarantee program specifically is necessary for the future of renewable energy in America?
My partner and I have both provided evidence for that.
All right. I would greatly appreciate it if you could send us that specific evidence.
Absolutely.
Now, I realized that when listening to your speech, much of the evidence that you presented was discussing the benefits of the loan program office as a whole. Is the affirmative case today abolishing the loan program office?
Not specifically, no.
All right. Now, we'll get into that. We'll just get into some clarification points a little bit future and a little bit more in the round. But specifically going back to that idea of interest payments and $2 billion that have been brought into the United States Treasury from that. If $2 billion have been brought in through interest payments to the government, would you say that it might even be a good idea to expand the program that is bringing revenue into the United States Treasury while at the same time helping renewable energy companies?
I think we should keep the loan guarantee program because it's benefiting the United States.
All right. And once again, the evidence that you've presented has been discussing specifically how the loan guarantee program has been providing all those benefits?
Yeah, several pieces were.
All right. Thank you. If you could just send me a copy of those pieces of evidence, that would be great. Because we're just about out of time.
The negative team will take prep time starting at 4 minutes and 9 seconds. Ending prep time at 2 minutes and 50 seconds. All right, and with 5 minutes on the clock, and assuming everyone is ready, then let's go ahead and kick this off. What can you do for me? This is a line that echoes through the studios at CNBC's Shark Tank. If you've ever watched the show, someone comes to pitch an idea, perhaps an innovative new product to these investors. And the investors want to figure out how much money they should put into this project, whether they should assume any risk, and whether or not the project is actually viable. And believe it or not, this process in the studios of Shark Tank is very much like the loan program offices studio as well. Instead, they're not producing a television show, but they are supporting the hegemony and leadership of our nation on in the energy industry. So let's clarify just a little bit what loan guarantees are. So loan guarantees, according to the affirmative team's very own definition, are as if the federal government had co-signed alongside these companies for a loan. So while it doesn't necessarily mean that the federal government is loaning that company money, they're assuming all of the risk under that loan, meaning that essentially they are loaning them money. They are loaning them money in the portion of risks. But as such, they gain an intrinsic and immense benefit. They are becoming these companies co-signers, which means that they're essentially becoming their business partners, as agreed to in cross-examination. So as the government becomes a business partner of these innovative new technology companies, they get to give input. They're allowed to help these companies strive for leadership, and those companies are allowed to as well. They begin to work in close tandem with the Department of Energy and in the Department of Energy's loan program office. And as they do so, they provide for an intrinsic boost to innovation, a way to bring us back to leadership and hegemony. And as it does so, it protects the United States from risk. I'd first like to move to this point of portfolios, because they brought up that our piece of evidence is that $2 billion of benefit actually comes instead from the loan program office in total. Well, I'd like to specify that comes from the loan program office's portfolio, which not only includes loan guarantee programs, but also includes other sources of revenue from other loan interest rates, which the loan program office has put in place specifically to bring forth revenue and to solidify itself against risk in the event of no payment back from these companies. And that same piece of evidence concluded at the very end that those loan payments that have not been paid back or any losses under the loan protection program have only totaled $810 million. My partner further substantiated that through a quotation from the director of the Center of Stanford's Energy Policy Institute. This is substantiated. I'd like to point forward to a fictitious story versus unvalidated points. You might remember the story of Anthony Garibaldi, and I love Tony, and I think that it's a great story, but unfortunately it fails to illustrate what's actually happening. Let's take a look at what Title 17 specifically of this loan protection program has actually done. According to John Sneed, the executive director of the Loans Program Office at the Department of Energy in June of 2018, only up until 2018, this is not even including the last 2 years of immense innovative growth, the Title 17 has financed first-of-a-kind projects in the United States, or catalytic for domestic industries. And he says that some examples are the first 5 photovoltaic solar power projects larger than 100 megawatts in the United States, the first new nuclear reactors to begin construction in the United States in 30 years, 4 wind farms across the country from Hawaii to Maine, including one of the world's largest onshore wind farms, the world's largest concentrating solar power plant, the first CSB-powered technology to incorporate thermal energy use in the world, revitalized geothermal power projects in Nevada and Oregon, and last but not least, a conditional commitment to guarantee a loan to construct the world's first methanol production facility to employ carbon capture technology in Louisiana. Not only are these projects wide-reaching, employing thousands across our nation, but they are some of the first of their kind within the entire world. The affirmative team has levied this supposed cost that we're receiving, and they're saying it's not worth it. But I point you to a return on investment. Even if, for some reason, we were being cost these billions of dollars, which the negative team rejects, we would still be receiving immense return on investment. Think back to that list that I just read, which comes from their office directly. Think back to all of the firsts that were there. The immense innovation that our nation has been able to secure, the amount of jobs that can be supported by each of those different firsts. Now, they might have said it only employs 593 jobs, but I think you can probably look to that piece of evidence and see that it takes more than 593 people to employ all of those projects. Now, secondarily, we've seen that we have gained under the Loan Protection Office's program. Their entire portfolio has a net benefit. If we take away the loan guarantee program, we have no guarantee that that benefit will remain. In fact, we have no guarantee that companies will participate at all. In fact, the free market is not being distorted. It's being protected. Innovation is being fostered. Our nation's leadership is being projected forward, and our nation is on a much better path. They provided no evidence to support this fictitious story, but instead, we've provided for you a reason to keep the loan protection program. Thank you.
The affirmative team will now be beginning 2 minutes and 55 seconds of prep time. Alright, we'll be pausing affirmative prep time at 10 seconds remaining. And with 5 minutes on the clock, I will assume that everyone can hear me and I'll jump right into it. Veronica DeRuggi, a senior research fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, wrote on 24th of March 2015 that, quote, subsidies are justified as being necessary to encourage the development of alternative energies because the private sector is unwilling to undertake the risk necessary for their development. The truth is that private investors should avoid throwing scarce dollars at endeavors that do not make economic sense. Instances where the private sector will not invest signal that it would also be a bad idea for taxpayers to, quote-unquote, invest. And she ends the quote there. So signaling from the private market to the federal government is a good idea. Of course it is a good idea. Taxpayers should not be made to invest by the federal government when they would not invest in the private market, and that's exactly what loan guarantees make them do. The federal government says, you won't gamble your money on this, but we, in fact, will gamble your money on this, except we won't see a return. That is absolutely fiscally irresponsible and gives no return on investment, of course. So let's move on to a couple of responses. In response to the $800 million versus $2.2 billion loss in this situation, I'd like to read the evidence from the negative team's assertion that there is only an $800 million loss. This is from the congressional hearing from February 15th, 2017, cited many times in this round. And in this hearing, it says, quote, both the DOE Inspector General and the Government Accountability Office found that the Department of Energy did not have the necessary expertise or the metrics to effectively evaluate these loans. Predictably, a number of companies that received Section 1705 loans went into default. In total, over $800 million in taxpayer money has been wasted by this DOE loan program. This is a situation of default in a loan program, not a loan guarantee. Not a loan guarantee. $800 million lost in a 1705 loan program, which is a currently discontinued DOE loan program. We're talking about the loan guarantee program. Directly below this paragraph in the article, it says, it is clear that the DOE loan guarantee program is expensive. The Government Accountability Office estimates that the cost for the current loan guarantees is $2.2 billion with a B. $2.2 billion. That is what we have cost in 5 defaults of the loan guarantee program's participants. There have been about 30 to 32 participants in the loan guarantee program, 5 of which have defaulted, 3 of which have paid back their loan. We have lost $2.2 billion on this. It's fiscally irresponsible. We don't necessarily disagree with the current situation. We don't necessarily disagree with how loan guarantees are applied. We don't necessarily disagree with any discretion policy, with any discretion that the DOE says they are applying to who gets the loan guarantee. We disagree with a loan guarantee in principle. It's a pay-to-fail program, and absolutely nothing else. The only thing a loan guarantee does is the federal government co-signs the loan and says, if you fail, we will pay you. That is distinctly different from a loan, and there is no capital involved in a loan guarantee. I'd like to move on to no capital involved in a loan guarantee, and this is in response to the 2NC, where it was asserted that, based on the definition of loan guarantees in our 1AC, that the federal government gives the capital, then assumes the risk. Let me look at that same definition from Taxpayers for Common Sense. It says, federal loan guarantees allow borrowers to receive a privately financed loan with the federal government assuming the risk. Privately financed loan. And this was read by the negative team. Apparently they overlooked it, but it is a privately financed loan. That's why it's fiscally irresponsible. The federal government stands to make no money from interest, stands to have no return on investment, and even if that return on investment is overlooked as for the greater good, no return on investment being for the greater good, there is no greater good here. There is only inefficiency and loss of incentive to innovate. And finally, I'll move to the final 2 responses I have, that is to the 2NC, that the Loan Programs Office has less than 2% loan loss rate. The loan loss rate of the Loan Programs Office is about loans, of course. The loan guarantee loss rate is $2.2 billion out of $28 billion invested. Closer to a 9% loss rate on the loan guaranteed loans, which are 30-year loans, and only 3 have paid back, 5 have failed. This is fiscally irresponsible. And my final response is that in response to the environmental return on investment, we will, of course, answer in following speeches.
The negative team will start prep time at 2 minutes and 50 seconds. No further prep time is necessary. The negative team had 29 seconds of prep time remaining. All right. Assuming everyone is ready, I'll go ahead and jump in. The Guaranteed Loan Program at the Department of Energy is one of the most beneficial programs that the United States has to incentivize energy production. And it's because my partner and I believe this, that we believe that we should keep our Guaranteed Loan Program. In this speech, I'm going to have 3 voting issues or reasons why a negative ballot is warranted. First, we're going to look at the low cost, high revenue. Then we're going to look at cooperation, not distortion, and finally, future investment, and show why the loan program is benefiting the United States. And even if it's not benefiting us now, it is setting us up for success in the future. So let's go to my first point, and that's voting issue. Low cost, high revenue. The LPO, or specifically the guaranteed loans, is low cost and high revenue. And my first subpoint is 810 million. 810 million. Now, we've heard a lot of different numbers, and let me clarify what that 810 million is. According to that testimony by energy and policy expert Dan Riker before the Senate in 2017, he said, quote, "Today, the actual and estimated loan losses to the portfolio," key word there, portfolio, are approximately 810 million, or only a little over 2% of the program's loans, loan guarantees, and commitments, and roughly half of the approximately 1.79 billion on interest payments the program has earned to date, end quote. So, what that's talking about is the loan program office in general, the whole portfolio, including loan guarantees, loan commitments, and normal loans. So the whole portfolio to date, according to energy policy expert Dan Riker before the Senate, has been $810 million. That is not a significant loss, and especially not a significant loss when compared to the benefits that we have brought up that were not substantially responded to by the affirmative side. Let me talk about some of those benefits, some of those benefits that I brought up and my partner brought up is that according to Director of Research Strategy and Programs for the Renewable Thermal Alliance, Dr. Nikki Springer, she quoted John Sneed, the Executive Director of the Loans Program Office at the DOE, that this loan program has lowered carbon emissions by 24 million metric tons. This is something that I talked about, how it's supporting 20,000 to 50,000 jobs in the United States, how it's brought $50 billion in project investment from the private industry. It's benefiting the United States, it's benefiting the people of the United States, and it's increasing innovation by bringing in private investment. Now, my second subpoint under this is cost, not lost. Cost, not lost. Now, the affirmative team contends that this program has lost $2 billion. And specifically, what their piece of evidence says is that the DOE program cost $2.2 billion. That is not a loss. They've not brought up another single piece of evidence saying that it's lost that much, and that's not what the evidence says. It says the GOA estimates that the cost for the loan program is $2.2 billion. That's cost money, not lost money. As we've shown, this money is benefiting the United States. Now let's go to my second voting issue, and that's cooperation, not distortion. Cooperation, not distortion. Now, if you remember, I brought up this point in my last speech, and it was something completely unresponded to by the affirmative side. What I said was this is not distorting the free market, it's actually coming alongside and cooperating with the free market. When the U.S. federal government issues a loan guarantee to a company, private investors are incentivized to help and also invest their own money to benefit these companies. And as the piece of evidence I read is that it brought in $50 billion in private investment. This is driving innovation. My partner talked about many new things that this program has brought about. It's cooperation, not distortion of the free market. And then my final voting issue is future investment. Future investment. Very evidently, the loan guarantee program has benefited the United States right now and is providing an ROI. But even if it wasn't, it would be a beneficial program because it is setting us up for success. My partner talked about how we need to be a leader in innovation and specifically energy technology. And what the Loan Program Office does, and specifically what the loan guarantees do, is they incentivize innovation in specifically things that would be a little more risky than usual. The reality is it sets us up to be a leader in technology, and it sets us up for success in the international community. So when we look at the Loan Program Office holistically, and specifically the loan guarantee, we see that it is low cost, high revenue. The losses of the entire portfolio have been 810 million, compared to the 24 million reduction in CO2, the 20,000 jobs, the billions of dollars in private investment that's brought in. Furthermore, it's cooperating with the free markets, not distorting it. And finally, it's a future investment for the United States, setting us up for success and setting us to benefit us for the years to come. So because the loan program and guaranteed loans are beneficial for the United States, we would ask you to vote for the negative side and keep them in the status quo. Thank you.
Beginning 10 seconds of preparation time. Ending preparation time. We have 2 seconds remaining. All right. I'll just go ahead and get started then. In this last speech of the round, there is one sentence I want you to remember. And that sentence is, little Tony can't ride his bike. Little Tony can't ride his bike. In this, the very last speech of the debate round, what I will be doing is I will be examining 3 voting issues, and in doing so, I'll be addressing the last speech. So let's jump right in with the very first voting issue, that of loan guarantees. Loan guarantees. In the last speech, our opponent brought up the fact that there is a low cost, high revenue. And he cited the fact that there were only $810 million lost. And he said this was the entire loan portfolio. And I agree, this is the Loan Program Office's loan portfolio, not the loan guarantee portfolio. There are 2 separate portfolios, and we've actually provided the entire loan guarantee portfolio to the negative team in today's debate round. So ultimately what we see is this $810 million lost is the loan portfolio, not the loan guarantee. When it comes to the loan guarantee, the number $2.2 billion has yet to be substantially refuted, and it stands. But let's assume maybe it was only $810 million. Is that an insignificant amount? Well, that depends on what it's accomplishing, and we'll get into that a little bit more further down. But just keep in mind a loan versus a loan guarantee. Loan provides interest payment, actually provides benefit to the United States government. A loan guarantee does nothing of the kind. A loan guarantee, the government, best case scenario, gains nothing from the program because if the company succeeds, then the loan doesn't have to be paid back from the federal government's budget. Worst case scenario, the federal government has to pay billions of dollars. Ultimately, what we find is that when it comes right down to it, a loan guarantee program is a pay-to-fail policy, and this is very important to remember. Now let's turn our attention to the second voting issue, that of the benefits of loan guarantees. The benefits of loan guarantees, and you can insert imaginary quotation marks around benefits. When we actually look at all the benefits that have been provided by loan guarantees, we find 2 things. 1, they are negligible, and 2, it's talking about the Loan Program Office. Let's look at the negligible benefits. The number has been brought up repeatedly by the negative that there have been 56,000 jobs gained through this. However, as I brought up in my last speech, the total number of permanent jobs is 593. Now, the negative refuted this by saying, well, I doubt that all those industries can be run by 593 jobs. But the analysis that the affirmative came to or used to come to that number was we actually looked at every individual project within the loan guarantee portfolio and added up the entire amount of permanent jobs created. And we actually sent that loan guarantee portfolio to the negative team so they could do the same if they so chose. Ultimately, we see that 593 jobs have been created at the price of $2.2 billion. As I said before, that's $3.7 million per job. Or maybe it's only $810 million that we've lost. That still means that we've paid $1.4 million per new United States permanent job. That is not an economic benefit. That is an economic waste. But then let's look at the second subpoint, that of Loan Program Office. Many of the benefits that the negative has proposed have come from the Loan Program Office as a whole. For example, that $2 billion in interest payments, those came from direct loans because with the loan guarantee, the federal government receives no interest payments. So those came from direct loans. Yes, that was $2 billion in increased revenue for the federal government, but those came from loans, not loan guarantees. And the third response or the third impact of the benefits is that we are actually going to continue to aid. Yes, we are going to be invested in the future of United States green energy. Remember, the affirmative plan actually makes $24 billion of revenue available for the purpose of direct loans that the government has already shown they can handle responsibly. So ultimately what we find is the claim that we will not be investing in the future is completely ungrounded because we are going to be investing through that and the $17 billion in direct grants for research and development. Which brings us to third and final voting issue, that of the harms. The harms. And when we look at the harms of a loan guarantee system, we find they're twofold. First, it harms taxpayers. Taxpayers have paid $2.2 billion, $810 million. Take your pick. We must ask, what have they gotten from their investment? And the answer is nothing. The example of Ivanpah Solar Company that was brought up at the very beginning of the round. Ivanpah Solar is now charging 2 to 5 times more than the traditional cost of electricity for California ratepayers. And ultimately, what we find is the second subpoint, that it harms the companies themselves. If it was $810 million to help these companies thrive, that would be one thing. But as the affirmative brought up in the very first speech and went unresponded to the entire debate round, this program only harms the companies that it was intended to help. And it's for all these reasons that I urge an affirmative ballot today. Thank you, and it's been a pleasure speaking for you.